They don't feed their families. What happens if you talk to them about the tragedy of the commons? If you're a member of the Indonesian parliament. Right. So it's a little more complicated than telling them not to fish. And I wouldn't go tell any oysterman that in Apalachicola either if you value your physical well-being. Okay, so fisheries and economic rights. The present economic interest. Without enforced regulation, fishermen at sea today are incentivized to catch as many fish as possible because his competitors are trying to catch as many fish as possible. Any fisherman who does not try to catch as many fish as possible today in the hopes that there will be fish to catch tomorrow will be disappointed under this paradigm because his competitors will just catch the fish repeatedly. Future economic interest. Only if there is enforced regulation in the present day will there be fish to catch tomorrow. It's therefore beneficial to future economic interests if there are such regulations limiting the ability of present-day fishermen to catch all they can. However, does this limitation not restrict present-day fishermen's economic rights? Let's talk about that. You brought up the tragedy of commons, the fisheries, the overfishing. You got these 6,400,000 people in Indonesia. What are we to do?
I have no idea.
And that's why environmental sustainability at times may be in conflict with human rights. Because we measure human rights in terms of today. We don't measure human rights in terms of tomorrow. Maybe we should, but that's not the paradigm we work with. Mike, you rose your hand?
I was trying to do what you pretty much just said about, you basically just tell them, yeah, I know you can't get 20 fish today, but hey, you're going to be able to fish next week.
That's why I'm a proud Democrat. I believe in regulated capitalism.
Oh, this was a couple slides ago, but the case was Goes v. Lopez for the education as a property right.
Oh, okay, thank you.
But there have been incidents of groups of fishermen in particular self-regulating and finding ways to come to agreements that they won't fish more than a certain amount and punishing each other for violating those without any formal governmental interference.
Yes, yes, that does happen.
So there are some cultures in which there are cultural values that help maintain the resource of the commons, and that if catching a female sturgeon is culturally unacceptable, then that helps maintain the population of sturgeon in the waterway.
Well, it's an intriguing thing to bring up, but yes. In the West, we're used to having our behavior determined by laws, and we think in terms of laws, rules, regulations. But that's not how the majority of the population of the world operates. They operate under customs and mores. When I have a prospective client come to me, with a problem, his neighbors calling the cops and yada, 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 my usual first piece of advice is to bake a cake and give it to his neighbor. And that usually solves the problem, and unfortunately puts me out of $1,500 in retainer fees. But we also operate under customs and mores. It's not just things like going to jail or getting fined. It's also a punishment if we don't get invited to the cool kids table, or to the block party, or if somebody shuns us or doesn't say hi in the hallway. There's all sorts of consequences to behavior that come below the law. And yes, a lot of tribes operate under that. He didn't tell me when I asked to try it on that that was for them. That's in Marrakesh, Morocco. And, you know, my catchphrase is, the fun never stops. I say it so much that when I left the Innocence Project, where I used to work, they put a plaque up saying that. And as you sort of held up your hands with, I don't know what to do, whenever I say the fun never stops, that's pretty much what I'm articulating as well. So can environmental sustainability be potentially adverse to human rights? Questions about the compatibility of environmental sustainability and economic rights. Should the present-day fisherman's right to a livelihood be held subordinate to future economic interests? What do we think?
Yes.
Within reason.
If so, what should the balance be? Otherwise, it's just empty words. What's the balance?
You have to, in that case, you can't stop them from feeding themselves. So, as you pointed out earlier, so as a consequence, with respect to sustainability, you're going to have to set some kind of a catch limit, which requires some kind of rule, and then you have the problem of either getting those fishermen to act in a cooperative kind of a way, or you're going to have to be able to police it. But at the end of the day, they have to eat, and the fish have to reproduce. So that's your balance.
They have to eat, and their children have to eat, and their children who aren't born yet have to eat.
That's right.
Geez, Ron, it sounds like you believe in big government.
I do.
And that's a dead shark. They caught it by accident.
One aspect of that can be paying people not to fish, or not to grow certain kinds of crops, or not to participate in certain types of agriculture. But then you often get people abusing that and saying they're getting paid not to fish while they're somehow circumventing the rule. You can hire fishermen to police those who are continuing to fish, in which case the money comes back into the fishing community, but as a cost for policing and self-control. And I understand that that's worked some in Africa in terms of maintaining some of the areas where the rights of the native peoples and the rights of the native populations of animals conflicted, and so hiring people to work protecting the animals and helping the farmers overcome the damage and still be able to maintain the health of their family. So yeah, it gets complicated.
I feel like
retraining like they did in Appalachian in that area, offering other opportunities, other livelihoods, and offering opportunities to train to do those.
Matthew?
I think you have to work with the community, whatever community, the people with interests, and get buy-in for whatever plan you have from them, and have some kind of agreement on how you're going to have sustainability, whether...
You look like you want to say something.
Well, we spoke earlier about examples of social pressures governing these kinds of things. With all the new kinds of communications we have nowadays, how can we implement those to accomplish these social pressures? I mean, it's a useful question. I don't have an answer, but
If we had an answer, we'd be the first. By the way, say cheese.
Earlier you said something about where do we establish the levels to define sustainability. From my point of view, really, we should go back to the Aboriginal levels as the ideal, because the Aboriginal peoples in any given geographical area, whether Native Americans or Native Mayans or African native populations, lived in harmony with a natural system in such a way that their population and the populations of all the other animals may have fluctuated some, but did so in a sustainable pattern, so that had we not interfered, they could have gone on for another 10,000 years. I was in the Tarahumara Sierra in Mexico and saw a little Tarahumara lady doing subsistence agriculture in her backyard. She had a bag of corn and a sharp stick. She poked a hole in the ground, she dropped a piece of corn in, and she stepped on it. Her ancestors have been doing that for 10,000 years and probably will be doing that for another 10,000 years if we don't manage to destroy all life on the planet with nuclear waste or something even equally awful.
But
Matthew?
the problem with that is that for thousands of years, the population of the Earth was more or less stable, and now it's grown to 10, 100,000 times what it was. And we need to be able to feed and sustain a much larger population, and we can't do that but by maintaining traditional methods of sustainability.
Has anybody done the math about that?
To China.
I'm sure somebody has, I haven't. Ron?
China, you should follow China's example as far as too many people on the planet.
Well, it doesn't seem like China's doing a great job of population control.
Well, I think they were until they found out that they had no girls and too many boys, and
Sounds like my kind of country.
They've vastly decreased population growth in China.
In Singapore, they also adopted a policy of either one or two children, you know, the idea of replacing yourselves. You know, Singapore is a very small island in between Indonesia and Malaysia. And, well, as it turned out, their math was a little bit fuzzy. They didn't anticipate that some people wouldn't have children at all, so the population dropped. And so then Singapore started paying people to have children. So you gotta check if you had more than two children. So, you know, China doesn't get it right at all. Should the same balance, okay. All right, I think we talked about alleviating suffering. Should the same balance be applied to manufacturing jobs lost in the United States? Well, we were talking about, you know, giving some cash or retraining people who are fishermen to do something other than fishing to support their families. So in the United States, should we do the same thing for manufacturing jobs that are being lost?
I actually saw where there was a report of some coal miners, a whole group that were recruited to work on wind turbines. And it was an easier job, and they were paid more, and they were very pleased with this new opportunity. Yeah, just new training.
It's amazing how hard it is to get people to take more money. How about the oyster harvest in Apalachicola? Should we start paying some oystermen to not oyster? Yes, ma'am.
I haven't touched an oyster or a scallop out of that bay in many, many years.
Thank you, that's more for me.
Why?
Pollution, it's toxic. It's a shame. I love both of them, but I would never. And I used to, not many years.
I thought it had a little musky on it.
That's something. What, how many years?
So what about
Isn't
tourism?
that primarily from
Thousands of
Years ago,
Yeah, it's
Could-
going to take thousands of years.
wasn't it Katrina that released a lot of chemicals? Oh, and the deep
I have
water.
no earthly idea.
Deep water, but I think from factories that overflowed and stuff, and also from the Deepwater Horizon explosion.
If you get caught with heroin in Singapore, I can stop your execution. But I'm not sure about Katrina. So what about tourism? In economics land, the panacea for all these unemployed fishermen is tourism. And I couldn't actually work it in overall into the presentation, but in the flyer I put out, I promised a picture of the Sahara Desert, so there it is for you. Tourism in the Sahara Desert. By the way, if you ever have the opportunity to ride a camel for 3 weeks in the Sahara Desert, Hawaii's nice too. So the case study I'm going to present to you is the Amazon. This is Quaylep. If you've never heard of it, you're not the only one. It takes several days of hard travel to get to. The nearest airport's several hundred miles away. You actually have to go through the Amazon jungle. You gotta hike. And this is actually in the Amazon jungle. Now, the clip is a 360, and it all pretty much looks like this. What distinguishing characteristic of a jungle seems to be missing in this portion of the jungle? Trees. You don't say. They clear cut all the trees as far as you can see. As far as a hike in the Amazon jungle, I gotta tell you, it was a little disappointing.
You could see around that where the trees could.
I absolutely could, including the farms that they put up. Now, this is Machu Picchu. You can't see it because I'm facing the mountain, but the clip does a 360 around Machu Picchu. And the jungles there are pristine, perfect. The animals, everything totally preserved. And it might be because tourists flock there. Tens of thousands a year. They have regulations on how many people can go in each day. That's why it's only tens of thousands each year. Whereas in Quaylep, they get about 6 people a week. That's why they call it cloud forest. You're actually a couple of miles in the air when you're hiking. So sometimes the best thing to do is leave the environment alone. We have tourism in the Everglades. There I am at the Skunk Ape World Research Headquarters. It has the word official on the sign, so you know it's legit. Of course, this is just silly, and nobody would rely on this for tourism. Of course, nobody does that. Oh, Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti. So just sustainability theory. Goes back to what you said. No less than a decent quality of life for all, no more than a fair share of the Earth's resource. And that's the concept of just sustainability theory. You know, that's the balance that scholars today are proposing. And let's hope we can convince some other people of that. All right, I want to thank you again for coming out today. My name's Richard. And if you have any questions, I'll be around. Enjoy the museum. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
We mentioned the toxins going into the Gulf after the hurricanes
Mhm.
began around the Gulf. Who's going to be held responsible for that, or can anyone be held responsible for that?
Well, I think we're going to hold the hurricane responsible.
I don't think they have a very large purse.
Well, it was worth a shot. Who do you think should be held responsible?
I'm not sure. I don't think we can hold anybody responsible, but it seems like the oil companies and chemical companies that have stored so much toxic material in such a hazardous area might be asked to clean that up.
All right, before I get to you, Ron, all right. The concept is called internalizing externalities. Is anybody familiar with what an externality is? That's a cost you don't have to pay to do whatever it is you're doing. So for example, let's say we have a widget factory. And the widget factory is able to create a widget for $5, okay? Now, the widget factory produces, let's call it water pollution. And the water pollution goes down the stream, irrigates into the farm, and for every widget that's made, causes that farm $10 in damage. Okay, so the widget itself costs $5 to make, and it costs somebody else $10. So the real world cost, if we were to internalize that externality, is each widget costs how much?
$15.
Right. In a sensible society, which we do not live in, we would impose a $10 tax per widget so that the widget factory internalizes the actual real-world cost per widget. Or what libertarians and conservatives would call strangling business. And then we take that $10 fee, and where does it go?
The person that lost the
To the farmer. Right. So in answer to your question, the solution is very simple economics, or specifically behavioral law and economics. We figure out what the actual cost per unit is for any particular industry. We find out how much they are internalizing a cost. We take the difference and we tax them that difference. And it goes into a fund that when the hurricane comes, the fund goes to pay for that. One benefit there is to Singapore, and it's very controlled society, is that they do things like that. And that's why it's one of only 2 countries in the history of the modern world to go from developing to fully developed. In fact, their per capita income is higher than ours. Okay, I'm trying to go in order of who raised their hands. I think it was Ron, you, and then you.
Pass.
Pass, okay. What was your question?
I was just going to say that the imposition of the $10 tax to offset what's happening downstream has the potential to motivate the industry that makes the widgets to manufacture differently so that they don't have that externality.
Yes, it does. And that's one of the reasons to do that, to increase efficiency. Yes, sir.
It's just not in Singapore that they're taking action. 3 days ago, the cities of San Francisco and Oakland sued 5 oil companies for the ill impacts of climate change.
Ron?
That's when the carbon tax was